Hello and welcome to another Doctor's Assistant 1 video. Today I'm doing a review of the Doctor Who episode, or Big Finish Audio episode, Doctor Who, the helliax Rift. Now sometimes I do occasionally get action figures, of the action figures that I have, and display them alongside with the episode of sorts. I was going to do that with this episode, and I'll get a Fifth Doctor action figure. And that, as I have with the some of the Colin stories that I've reviewed, had like the 6th Doctor or the 8th Doctor, as I say, at the side of the episode as I'm reviewing it. But the thing was, like, the 5th Doctor figure that I have is really sort of worse for wear, to say the least, so I'd rather not display it right now. But yeah, so a little bit of a disclaimer there. As well as that, this is my first ever real proper 5th Doctor story, I guess. And that, I don't know if technically Light at the End would count as a 5th Doctor story, as it's a multi-Doctor story, so, you know. But beyond that, beyond Light at the End, Big Finish audio-wise, this is the first and only 5th Doctor story I have, so, you know, I don't have a lot to base off. I don't have a lot to sort of go by in terms of, like, obviously, experience of listening and or reviewing Peter Davison and or 5th Doctor stories per se and that. However, I have watched him in the classic series, obviously, and that. But yeah, first of all, I'll go through the packaging and all the cover. The cover is probably one of the, well, not worst, but one of the ones that I'm not too keen on. And that I have to agree with my friend Michael back when I was at his once. He was going through the Big Finish website and then just sort of said that he really didn't like this cover for one reason or another and that. And I have to agree, it is quite dull. However, I do feel like the purple, at least the colour palette's decent, in the sense that the purple motif of the cover really does sort of pop, and it clashes with the white of the Peter Davison's jumper and coat, as well as the unit medical officer's sort of thingy there as well as his uniform and all that. Then you've got the banner and that, which is helliax Rift by Scott Hancock, Peter Davison there, full cast audio drama. You've got a house there, as well as a lot of fire and some trees and that, and the planet in the background, some lightning and whatnot. Then on the inside you've got both the discs, as well as the reverse, or the standard cover, as well as the reversible one. I've reversed it to the Peter Davison one, obviously. Cast list, as well as the bio of the story, the running time, which is 2 hours, who it's written by Scott Hancock again, and then on the spine you've got Doctor Who, the helliax Rift 237, so it means that it's the 237th Big Finish audio in the monthly range releases. And as well, fun fact, it is the first, if you didn't already know this, but first episode in the Unit trilogy they did back in 2018. So yeah, so not only is it, for me personally, my first 5th Doctor story, even, it's also my first, or the first part to this brand new Unit trilogy. So yeah, first of all, Peter Davison was phenomenal in this. I really, really enjoyed it. For him, he was really good in this. At first, he plays the Doctor quite sort of bewildered and flustered almost, but he gets into his groove later on and that. And it's kind of weird because the irony is that a big criticism of Peter Davison's era throughout his run, really. I mean, they try and rectify it towards the tailor end, but by that point it's already too late. The damage has been done, as it were. Which is the biggest criticism of his run, is that there's too many companions, which is ironic considering that in this story, technically the Doctor doesn't have a companion. It's almost like a 5th Doctor version of Deadly Assassin, which is kind of ironic considering that was the last classic Doctor Who episode I reviewed, and that in the classic series, but of this recording. But yeah, the guy, Lieutenant Daniel Hopkins even, yeah, Daniel Hopkins is the medical dude, and he plays like the almost companion-esque role. It's, as I say, not too dissimilar to Deadly Assassin in the sense that Tom Baker in that story doesn't have a companion, but the companion-esque roles are delegated to those two Time Lords. It's similar with this guy. He's very much the sort of asks lots of questions, is very curious about the Doctor, and all likes the Doctor and wants to keep him alive, preferably, and that, which is pretty difficult considering his officer-in-chief in command is quite sort of against the Doctor and the way the Doctor goes about things and that, and yeah, they clash quite a bit, you know, and that, and I like that, you know, it's quite nice. Part 1's quite mysterious, quite atmospheric, has a nice pace to it and a nice build-up. Part 2, I found Part 2 the most boring. Part 3, I probably found a little bit more interesting because there's a bit of a plot twist to Part 3. I didn't, however, like the ending to the whole story. The ending at Part 4 just felt very abrupt. Some of the cliffhangers felt okay. Like, the cliffhangers were, as I say, just okay. They felt a bit flat. Like, a lot of different scenes in this episode, and I don't know why, if it's the audio design, or if it's the script, or the script editor's fault, or whoever's fault it is, but personally, I felt as though there was a lot of flat moments, as in things that were supposed to be a lot more sort of epic, a bit more bombastic, a bit more, like, they had a lot more sort of substance, and a bit more grit, and a bit more, like, oomph to it, you know, like a bit more, you know, like, dun 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 dun, like, rhythm to them, and a suspense to them, basically. And that with the cliffhangers, and with the army, well, not army, but unit, because unit's heavily in this story, it features heavily in this story, and seeing as it's the debut of this new sort of unit team and unit people, and that, who I think, based off the behind the scenes for this story, carry over to Our Other Cybermen and Warlock's Cross. However, I don't know if Higgins does carry over, which would be a shame because I really, really liked his character, and that it was very sort of he had his commanding moments, but he was for the most part very sort of knowledgeable, kind, and just sort of very sort of stand back and wait and see type thing approach, I guess. I don't know. Like, he wasn't quite like, you know, shoot first, ask questions later. But yeah. Yeah, the other scene that stands out to me as well as the cliffhangers is as being a bit flat, was the fight stuff, like the army, well, not army, but unit fighting and having this fairly big confrontation with some of the aliens towards the latter end, either in Part 3, if not latter end of Part 3 into the beginning of Part 4. There's a lot of unit soldiers attacking the aliens and stuff, but it just feels not like as epic. Like, I didn't hear that many gunshots, I didn't hear that much of the aliens doing anything, or if I did, it just felt a bit more muted, if that makes sense. It just felt a bit lackluster and a bit odd, really. As I say, Peter Davison is phenomenal here. I think because he doesn't have so many companions in the story, he is here he is at the forefront to be able to shine, and he's always one step ahead, or not even one, but several steps ahead of a unit, which I love. And that, because as you can imagine, that really gets on their nerves. He's very against the authority, against the unit, and that, in that sense, constantly tries to be the peacemaker, which leads into a really, really good scene in the latter end. Well, I think it's either in Part 3 or 4. I think it's Part 4, actually. There are two really standout things that happen towards the latter end. There's a plot twist that I quite like in Part 3, and then in Part 4 there's like two standout moments where we're in the Doctor's mind, which is just cool. And then also another bit that I like is the what was the other bit I liked? Well, just a bit with some of the aliens and some of their abilities and some stuff they do, and that, and yeah, I don't know, this new unit's interesting because it's not quite like the original sort of old school, you know, John Pertwee one, you know, and that it's not just a complete just sort of alien invasion story. What is nice is that it's almost painted like it would be like that. And if you're expecting that, then yeah, you might be a bit disappointed that it's not that. But it does take on a twist that I don't want to spoil what it is, but it's interesting to say the least. And that, or at least I thought it was. It did get a bit difficult to follow in places and that. It might not have had to be 2 hours long. I don't know. I mean, it did feel a bit bloated in parts, and it felt like there was a bit of padding here and there, you know, and that. But overall, I think it's a decent story. It's a good start. It's a good foundation. Hopefully they build up from here. And that it's not the best story ever, but it's not the worst. It just needed to succeed in sort of telling a coherent story and then having some elements that could be taken into another story, which there are, like, as I say, side characters with the unit characters other than the medical officer, because there's like the Brigadier S character as well as a sergeant woman person who does like a lot of the scanning and communications officer type person. So there are those two characters who might crop up again in Hour of the Simon or Warlock's Cross, I'm not sure. But either way, I think that the Helliax Rift has some really interesting ideas, some interesting concepts, really good performances from everyone, good sound design for the most part, besides little blips here and there where things didn't feel as epic as they could have, and that. Very atmospheric at first, feels very much like Doctor Who meets X-Files, which is kind of ironic because I said that about The Silent Scream, which was my last Big Finish audio review. But yeah, I'd give the Helliax Rift an 8 out of 10. Maybe not a strong 8 out of 10, or even a middle 8 out of 10, but maybe a low 8 out of 10, you know. Really high 7, low 8 out of 10, maybe, you know, that sort of thing. I do think it's better than the Silent Scream, but I don't think it's as good as, say, Silver Turk or even the Juggernauts or Terra Firma. But I do think it's still decent and that. So yeah, thanks for watching, comment, rate and subscribe.